What's going on, folks? It's your boy Devilian7, and today, at long last, I bring you the next subscriber special you've all been waiting and asking for. This time we're gonna take a look at my top 5 favorite playable characters in our beloved Yakuza series. I actually wanted to choose something else like top 10 long battles, but unfortunately, any list with battles currently hinges on some upcoming releases such as Kiwami 2 and the English release of Yakuza 6. So until then, there probably will not be any top lists that involve battles. So for now, and without further holdups, let's just dive right into the video. If you've started with Yakuza 1, 2 or 3, you would know that this franchise always had just one playable character, and that is Kazuma Kiryu. And we never really expected things to change that much, but then Yakuza 4 came along, and it introduced new playable characters for the first time, and they were all the rage back when it was announced. The concept of playing as someone that isn't Kazuma Kiryu in a Yakuza game was simply unprecedented. And so when we've seen Akiyama, Saitama and Tanimura with their vastly contrasting fighting styles compared to Kiryu's, it created and added a new spark of life and vitality to the franchise. We were given completely new fighting styles built from scratch, and each protagonist gave us something new to explore in combat. But combat's not all that they've got going for them. Naturally, each protagonist also has his own backstory and tales that shape them up to be the great characters that we love and admire. But that should go without saying. Then Yakuza 5 came to introduce Tatsushi Nada and Haruka Sawamura as new playable characters. Although Haruka's gameplay was more like, "Look at me, I'm a cute princess!" rather than actually fighting. But moving on, point is that the introduction of new playable characters definitely changed the franchise in more ways than one, and I think it's about time I get on to listing them. One last thing before I actually get onto the list, because some people need to understand this. This list is purely subjective. It is by no means objective or an official one. These are all just my thoughts on the characters and my reasoning as to why I like or dislike things about them. If you disagree, that's fine. I say this again, this video is only my personal opinion and thoughts regarding the characters. Opinions are also subject to change with time. Now, bearing that in mind, let's kick off the list with the first entry. Saitama Taiga, as with Tanimura and Akiyama, made his first appearance in Yakuza 4 and later returned as a playable character again in the next entry, Yakuza 5. Saitama in 4 have the good hair, but in 5 he bald, so he better in 4, right? In all seriousness, Saitama's fighting style is known to be that of brute force and raw strength, looking very crass or unrefined or whatever you want to call it. You will breeze through the boss fights like they're fucking punk-ass ape from good old Kiwami with how much of a beast this dude is, especially after you get the ability called Herculean Spirit, which, once you're in heat mode, it'll completely negate any possible flinching from enemy attacks. His rush combos feel a bit limited as they're limited to just 3 square openings. So on one hand, the game difficulty is absolutely violated when you're playing as Saitama, and on the other hand, I think that his fighting style can be kind of fun. I especially have fun doing Kiryu's headbutt heat action as him for some reason. But overall, while I think his combat style is fun, it can get old or stale somewhat quick, as I feel like it's more basic than other fighting styles at very least, and I just don't have much more than that to say about it. Now, moving on to Saitama as a character and the storyline of Yakuza, the impression that we, or at least I got from him when I first saw him in Yakuza 4 is that he's a quiet, hardened individual that harbors a beast within and could tear you to pieces if you pissed him off. And that's not far off the mark, but as you see more of him, you'll also find out that he has a big heart, and this is seen even more so in 5. But what I did not like about him in 5 is how he ironically comes off as a lot more naive than he was in 4. Trusting a guy who shot someone you were talking to 5 minutes ago and then forcing him to become your Kyodai like nothing happened? Yeah, no. Now, don't get me wrong, I did enjoy 5 a lot, especially back when it came out, where it felt like a very significant update over 3 and 4 in terms of gameplay. And I do enjoy playing as Saitama and his boss fights, but I simply think that other characters may have just done it better. Masayoshi Tanimura, aka the protagonist that'll never come back due to some voice actor issues, is a pretty boy detective who also happens to be the youngest of the 4 playable characters in Yakuza 4, nicknamed the Parasite of Kamurocho due to resorting to illegal gambling and blackmailing small brothels, but it's all a necessary evil for a good cause, that being supporting immigrant children who are left without parents, as a man who grew up without a father at a very young age himself. Tanimura's gameplay is unique in that it emphasizes the use of parries more than with other characters, having it unlocked at level 1 and all it takes is to block an attack before the highlighted state fades away. I find his fighting style to be much more entertaining than Saijima's, as I feel like he has more options such as having 2 grabbing phases, the default one that everyone has, as well as his arm lock phase. I think he also has a pretty cool taunt even though it barely increases any heat. In addition, he starts with 4 rush combos that can be increased into 5 after upgrades, and his parry adds a little more potential into his combat. The fact alone that he's swifter than Saitama is enough for me to prefer him, but he also has several pretty cool hit actions, such as the rush combo ending ones or the arm lock one where you literally throw a guy into the air by pulling his hand up his crotch and then kick the fuck out of his jaw. Just like that. Fabulous, isn't it? Man, I sure love me some smug Tanimura, and since we're at it, have a look at some of his other cool hit actions. I also feel the need to mention how I fell in love with his blue heads-up display and start menu, but that's a feature that I loved about Yakuza 4 in general, with each character having his own color. Yakuza 5 had this as well, but it was restricted to the start menu and had no appearance in combat, which is why I prefer the way it was in 4, but this is just a minor nitpick. Now, what do I think about Tanimura as a character in the storyline? I think that his story is simple and straightforward enough, which is, to me, is a very good thing considering the clusterfuck that was Yakuza 5's story with its crazier than usual dramatic plot twists. Tanimura is a detective who suspects there has been foul play with the death of his father, so he grows up to become a detective as his father was and look into it on his own, and sure enough, it was a conspiracy. Then, with the help of Kiryu, Akiyama and Saitama, the 4 team up to face the masterminds behind the plot of Yakuza 4, as well as confront the person pulling the strings of the events ever since his father's murder, Seishiro Monakata. And the way he goes through his bodyguards and the dynamic intro of this fight is just beautiful.
やれこいつは早く殺せ副総監いや宗像静四郎お前の野望はここで終わりだ覚悟しろ
Overall, Tanimura to me plays out better than Saitama, even though he only shows up in one game, but his story is very believable and the way he goes about it is as well. This is a very trivial detail, but I like how he is multilingual, speaking not only Japanese but also Chinese and Korean on top of that, which I think is pretty admirable. Everyone's favorite slacker, Akiyama Shun takes the number 3 spot because god damn his combat style is fun as hell, and at the same time, it's much swifter compared to the previous 2 characters. For those of you who are new to the series and aren't familiar with Akiyama, he is a moneylender known as the Lifeline of Kamurocho because of how he loans money to those that have been rejected by other loan sharks. This man had the fucking Omi alliance of all Yakuza clans, which has never bowed down to anyone, might I add. bows straight down to him, an ordinary civilian, after the events of Yakuza 5.
けど今日だけは頭下げさせてもらう。秋山藩、世話になった。
But being an ordinary civilian to an extent also means that he has little to no personal involvement in the games. So usually when he's there and playable, it's because he's just there and happens to help out the other protagonists and characters. For instance, in Yakuza 5, you either already know this or will see it once you play it. He doesn't have a part of his own, but rather shares half a part with Haruka's part of the game. So that should tell you something about how he may be better as a supporting character than a main protagonist, especially since he's usually there just to aid Kiryu and others, despite how fun he is to play as. But with that said, don't get me wrong, his fighting style is one of the most entertaining ones for me out of all of them in the series. He can move around pretty quickly and it's just very satisfying to land all those lightning fast kicks, and of course he has a selection of heat actions that are satisfying to pull off and look at. Have a look at these!
Akiyama-san!
He has a really cool battle theme in 4 and in 5 as well, and the fact that he was the one who introduced additional taunts into combat makes him unique in a way. There is one specific hit action that was particularly fun to do in Yakuza 4 that has never returned under the same appearance. It sort of comes back in Yakuza 5, but the way it looked in Yakuza 4 with all the kicks to the face rather than knees to the face made it look way less rough around the edges and more unique in a way. But regardless, I feel like there's less to say about Akiyama than the other protagonists, because he's just not as involved as the others. But he's still a very good supporting character and great to play as well. Hold up though, you thought this was over, didn't you? One very important mystery regarding Akiyama remains, which has never been explained yet. How or when the hell did he learn such a kick-ass fighting style? Because for Tanimura and Saitama and Kiryu, you already know that it's part of the job. Basically, Tanimura being a police officer, that's understandable, and Saitama and Kiryu being Yakuza is also understandable. But Akiyama on the other hand, I mean, in Yakuza 4, it was mentioned that back when he collected all the money from the 2005 Millennium Tower explosion incident, some punks showed up to steal the money from him, but rather than defending himself, Arai appeared and helped Akiyama get his money back. So will this question ever get answered? I don't know. Perhaps we'll find out in a future game if he ever shows up again. Coming in at the number 2 spot is the one-eyed quote-unquote assassin, the Mad Dog of Shimano, Goro Majima. I think that by now pretty much everyone and their mothers know who Majima is, especially with most recent newcomers having started with Yakuza 0. And anyone who's played any other game should also know him because he's there in most games. But as you all know, the only games where he's actually playable are 0 and the zombie spin-off Yakuza Dead Souls. Nevertheless, even with only just 2 games, Majima made all the impact on the fans of the franchise, and his popularity only keeps increasing as the series moves on forward. But with fame and popularity, it's only natural that popular characters will become a subject of conflict among the fans as to whether or not they're being milked the hell out of. But let's put all of that aside and just focus on what we came here for. My personal take on Majima as a character in the story and his gameplay. Now, when I first saw and fought him in Yakuza 1 about 10 years ago or so, I was like, wow, look at how fast and evasive this guy is. I wish we could somehow play as him. And what do you know, today in 2017, that's exactly what we got thanks to Yakuza 0, and it was just beautiful. As if playing as him alone wasn't already good enough, the developers, back when the game was still not released in Japan, revealed that 0 will give Kiryu and Majima 3 fighting styles each, along with a secret one, and you already know how much that served to really keep things fresh and have a lot of moves to do. It was something unprecedented in a franchise such as this one, where we've gotten used to just using one fighting style throughout the entire game. This goes without saying, but I enjoyed the fuck out of Majima in Yakuza 0, and it was just about everything that I hoped for. All 4 of his fighting styles are fun to use and bring different heat actions to the table, with Thug being my favorite out of the 4. The neck break heat action is fucking gorgeous, along with this ground heat action and this specific camera angle where you get some of that sly Majima goodness. This is just me talking about the most trivial of shit, but there's just something I like about how he squeezes in these cunning expressions in his combat when you barely see him like that in any of the main story cutscenes, in 0 specifically, probably due to how serious it would get at times, and so it's like he's releasing all of that bottled up stress through combat, and really, you can't blame the guy with what he was going through in that game. His story in 0 was just stellar, and it really had you take a deeper look at his character and his perspective of things. Playing as him in Dead Souls was great as well, but not nearly as great as it is in 0, because Dead Souls was all about guns and you could barely use hand-to-hand combat. Overall, I feel like he's one character that was initially intended to be one thing, but over the years, his popularity increased overwhelmingly, which most likely led the developers into wanting to do something more with him. And so if you played all the canonical games, you could sort of see how he began to change from what he was, a supporting character that would help and or mess with Kiryu from time to time, to someone that hogs a lot of the screen time to the point where some fans are beginning to become sick of it. Kiwami especially comes to mind. Now, I completely and wholeheartedly understand where they are coming from, but I'm the kind of guy that tries to enjoy the games regardless of what people say about them, and usually there is a lot of entertainment to net out of them. But yeah, Goro Majima, amazing character, fun to play as, also has one of the best tattoos in the series in my opinion. The gorgeous Hannya, which has a pretty interesting backstory to it. The story of the Hannya, in short, according to Japanese folklore, is that this same demonic face that you see on Majima's back used to be a woman who was cheated on by her lover, and this cheating had her very infuriated with jealousy and rage, ultimately turning her into a murderous demon. Perhaps there are more variations to the tale of the Hannya, and considering we're talking about a franchise like Yakuza, where tattoos represent their holders in more ways than one, it makes you wonder about how Majima and his tattoo connect to each other. And now, for the #1 spot. Haruka! How about no? Who else could it be but our beloved Kazuma Kiryu? I gave a lot of thought to who was gonna take the #1 spot. I really did. I was almost certain that it's Majima, and I even told people on occasions that he definitely is my top favorite out of the protagonists. But when it came down to officially deciding who was gonna take the spot, I looked at the grand scheme of things and decided that Kiryu was going to be #1 after all. When it comes down to it, I've seen a lot more of Kiryu, and I've been with him on a journey longer than that of any other protagonist. The closure of Yakuza 6 drove home just how much time I've known Kiryu for, and how long of a trip I've been on with him. I've known him since I was practically like 11 years old or something, and now I'm about to hit 21 in only 2 months. It made me appreciate him a lot more than I did before finishing the game. even if it is considered the worst by many in the fanbase. I think that one thing Yakuza 6 nailed for me is the emotional build-up for its ending. Now don't worry, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but that's the best way I can put it without spoiling any details. No matter how you slice it, he really is the most balanced out of every protagonist in more ways than one. His mentality is the most level-headed out of the bunch, heck, probably out of every single character in the entire franchise even, especially as his journey goes on. His mindset isn't the only thing that makes him the unique character that he is. He even has it in his combat. When comparing his fighting styles to other protagonists, you'll also see that he retains a balance in speed and power without having too much of the other. Simply put, this hard-ass, badass motherfucker doesn't carry the Azure Dragon on his back for nothing. And apparently, the dragon symbolizes power, wisdom, and serenity, among other things, which is perfectly representative of how Kiryu actually is. Now, I'm not sure how true this next statement is, but apparently, the dragon's color being silver alludes to the fact that he's a pure person. I could go on to theorize about what exactly is meant by pure here, but perhaps that's a topic for another video. Kiryu goes from being a rough and tough punk in Yakuza 0 to the most sensible, mature, and yet badass and experienced old man in Yakuza 6 who still hasn't lost his touch and is feared by everyone in the Yakuza underworld as the legendary Dragon of Dojima. The man has one hell of a history behind him that we all can explore and observe his character growth, and for me that alone is reason enough for me to have him earn the #1 spot. His combat usually has the most to offer compared to other characters. Several counters, more heat actions, more techniques, unique abilities with heat, and so on. Although there are some real good heat actions that I dearly miss which do not make an appearance in recent games. Have a look at these marvels. Fighting as him gets better with each passing game. And say what you will, but I had a blast with Yakuza 6's combat, and now that game's engine is taken onto Kiwami 2, where it's improved upon and brings back a lot more that 6 lacked. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Yakuza 6's combat is the absolute best and everything else is shit, just that I had a lot of fun with 6's combat, that's it. But, like, I don't understand, why do some people get so worked up when someone merely says that Yakuza 6's combat is fun? If someone's having fun with the game, why go out of your way and try so hard to ruin it for them? It only makes you look bad in front of everyone, just let them have their fun. But I digress. And there you have it, folks. Those were my top 5 playable characters in the franchise. Now you may be asking, what about Shinada? And that is a good question. Here's what I can tell you about Shinada. I do not dislike him. I enjoyed his combat very much, but it feels like it was made for regular enemies rather than being compatible for bosses as well. His R1 plus circle counter is pretty much useless against bosses, which is a true shame. And heck, even against normal enemies. For many people, the square triangle circle combo is the way to go with him, but despite that, he was still a fun addition to the franchise and I liked playing as him. Another thing I liked about his story part is that it felt like you weren't playing a main Yakuza game due to how secluded this part was from the main story at first. It legit felt like you were playing a Yakuza spin-off instead, and I found that to be pretty appealing. One gripe that I have with him in the story is that thanks to 5's anime-ish theme of Yume and dreams, there are speeches thrown around like no other game in the franchise, and Shinada's speeches were especially complex and not exactly straight to the point. And believe me, I'm all for profound speeches and characters, but he was just on an entirely different level. But regardless, I enjoyed Shinada's part a lot, as well as Yakuza 5 in general. And yes, even Haruka's parts were a fresh change of pace, and liking that doesn't make you any less manly. Before I let you go, remember these sweet pieces that people have been asking me for? Well, today I've uploaded them just for you guys. Link's gonna be down in the description, so make sure to grab them. Thank you for watching this video, but more importantly, I want to thank each one of you, 8,070 people that are currently following this channel, and any that even think about following me at any point in the future. We've come a long way, and here's to a bigger success for Yakuza, and to even greater milestones for the channel. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and you guys best prepare yourselves for a Kiwami 2 stream tomorrow. This is your boy Devil Leon 7, and I am out.